Hello guys and welcome back. So in this section we'll talk about decorators in a greater detail. Okay, so Angular offers four main types of decorators. There are class decorators, for example components and for example add component and add ng module. Then there are property decorators, for example at input and at output that we have used. Okay, so these are used inside the properties that are in the class. Then we have method decorators that decorate a method inside a class. And then we also have parameter decorators that are used for parameters inside constructors. For example, the inject operator. Okay, so in case of class decorators, these are the top level decorators that are used to express our intent for that class to Angular. Okay, so we with the help of class decorators tell Angular that this particular our intention for this class is for it to be either a component or a module or a pipe, a service, a directive, or any other thing of this sort. Okay, so these allow us to define this intent without actually adding anything to the class specific to our intent. Okay, so say for example in this class example component here, we aren't specifically mentioning anything related to it being a component. Okay, if you have a look at the code that we have here in the here in the example component and that of the code that we have in the example module, then you'll see that the code is exactly the same, right? So we aren't making any change inside the classes to tell Angular that this particular class would be a component and this particular class would be a module. We are just decorating it with a decorator, even though the contents of the classes are same, but this ends up being a component while this ends up being a module. Okay, so without having to actually put any code inside the class, we are able to do that with the help of these class decorators. And we have these many decorators that are class decorators in Angular. We have a component decorator, an ng module decorator, a directive decorator, a pipe decorator, and an injectable decorator. Component decorator helps us specify an intent to Angular that this particular class, which is decorated by the component decorator, is going to be a component. This decorator helps us, the ng module decorator helps us telling Angular that this particular class is going to be a module. The directive decorator does that for a directive, the pipe decorator for a pipe, and an injectable decorator for a service. Okay, so all we need to do is just decorate a class with these decorators, and Angular will already know our intent or our intention for that class. Then we have the property decorators. So these are the second most commonly used decorators in Angular, and they allow us to decorate some specific properties on our class. Okay, so say for example, if we have this example component here, okay, and this example component has an example property as it can be seen, which is of type string, then we can simply decorate this property with an input decorator, and that will tell Angular that this property is an input property and it can be binded in such a way to this example component. Okay, so we basically tell Angular's compiler that it needs to create an input binding for the property name and link it to where exactly it is going to be used inside the template. Okay, and then the value that is being passed inside this binding right here will automatically be assigned to this example property that we have inside the example class. Okay, so just by adding this decorator, the magic happens, and we sort of get some input value in this input decorator, in this property decorated with an input decorator when someone uses it like so. Okay, so it is also quite easy to change because if there is some change that is required, then that change should be happening only in the name that we see here, right here, and then in the name that is present inside this class that is here, right here. Okay, so if and the beauty of this is that we can also create aliases for inputs. So if, say, if you want to change the name of this property inside that class, but still you don't want to change any other names inside wherever this particular input property has been binded to, you can alias it with the same property, the example property here, while the actual name of that property can change, and you can use some other name for it. Okay, and in that case you'll just have to change that name inside this example component. Okay, after that we have the method decorators, and these are very similar to the property decorators that we have in Angular, but then they are used to just decorate the methods in our class. Okay, so say for example, if we have a on host click method in our class, then we can decorate it with a host listener that will tell Angular that this particular method is going to be called whenever the click event of the thing that this component sits on is called or is triggered. Okay, and it will also pass us the event data that we can see in here. Okay, so it will pass us with the event data, and it would be available, so we can do things like check for any specific parameter that we want from that event object. Okay, so it lets us decide some specific methods in our class that can be used for this functionality just by adding a host listener. Okay, and that was it regarding method decorators. So apart from that, we also have the parameter decorators, and these are basically used if we want to inject a particular type of dependency in a component. Okay, so you can use it inside the constructor by using the inject decorator like so, and specify the property or specify the type of dependency that we want to inject, and this type of dependency is going to then be injected inside the variable that you specify here. Okay, and then if you log the variable right here, then you will be able to see that this particular variable is of type my service, as specified in here. Okay, so now this is something that we generally don't use, because we can use the metadata that is exposed by TypeScript that will actually help us to do all the hard work. Okay, and so we can simply specify the name of the property, and then we can specify its type like so, and then Angular and TypeScript is going to do all the hard work for us, and basically tell us which, or basically give us an instance of that particular class as a dependency. Okay, so these are the four types of decorators there are in Angular, but then we also have flexibility to create custom decorators. So if we want to create custom decorators, then decorators are nothing but essentially functions that are called with some specific field or with some specific class object. Okay, and these are called at runtime by Angular itself. Okay, so since there are four types of things that are in Angular that can be decorated, that is a class, a parameter, a method, or a property, there are four types of decorators that can be manually defined. So first one is a class decorator like so. Okay, and this class decorator would be a function that would receive a target, and this target would then be a function itself. Okay, and then you can return from this class another function like so, or it can also return void. Okay, then we have property decorators. These receive two things. First one is the target object. Okay, that is going to be basically the property that this decorator is this decorator is decorating, and it also receives a property key which is of either of type string or symbol, and then this also returns a function or void. Okay, as you can see, because the function extends a function in that we have in TypeScript, so this is what it returns. Then we have method decorators, and method decorators in this case would receive three arguments. The first one would be a target object, the second one would be a property key, which can either be a string or a symbol, and a descriptor, which is of typed property descriptor. Okay, and this is a generic type, so if there is a type of say a class or a method, then that can be specified in here. Okay, and then this returns either the typed property descriptor, or it can return a void. And then finally we have a parameter decorator that we have here, and is this is something that receives a target object, a property, and a parameter index, but eventually returns void. Okay, so these are all the custom types of decorators that we can create in Angular. Now, in the next section, we'll have a look at how we can create and leverage a custom defined class decorator in Angular. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.